Hello, participants. We're just going to wait a couple more minutes here before we get started. Thank you for joining the webinar today. Okay, it's 1:03. We're going to go ahead and get started. I'm Michael Segala, consultant out of Fresno Clovis area. I work with all the COGs of the San Joaquin Valley, and this is one of our programs, which is the REAP program. I have with me Robert Phipps, the Deputy Director at Fresno COG. Robert.
Good afternoon.
Thank you. Robert and I manage the REAP program for the Valley, and this is the February 28th REAP workshop, one of many, on GIS housing capacity and analysis tools for the San Joaquin Valley. So let me go over a few items of information, then I'll hand it over to our project team who will handle this webinar. So once again, thank you for your attendance. If you have any questions, they're going to make natural breaks during this webinar so they can we can answer your questions. You can ask questions through the chat, through the question and answer function, or by raising your hand. This webinar is scheduled for 1 hour. It is also eligible for APA AICP CM credit, and we'll send the course number after this webinar. This webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be posted to the REAP webpage in about 2 to 3 days. We will also send a post-webinar evaluation that we encourage you to fill out as well. So at this point, I just wanted to highlight one other thing, and that is after today, we have a spring workshop series on affirmatively furthering fair housing. I'll place this flyer in the chat as well during this webinar so you can register for additional workshops on AFFH. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Joey Skanga with HDR Calthorpe, and he is going to introduce his team and take you through this webinar.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm really happy to be here. This is a culmination of a long period of work, and we have a very distinguished team doing this work. My name is Joey Skanga, and I am from HDR Calthorpe. Now, the reason we call it HDR Calthorpe is because we're the prime. HDR, I've been a member of HDR for 4 years now. Prior to that, I was with Calthorpe Associates 30 years. And there was an acquisition of HDR to Calthorpe. So Peter Calthorpe and I have been business partners over the last 35 years, and we're still working together on this type of work, on this mission-driven work. I'm going to introduce Urban Footprint. We have 2 gentlemen on, Nathan and Dustin, and give us a quick introduction of yourselves.
Great. Thanks, Joey. This is Nathan Stone, Manager of Enterprise Customer Success at Urban Footprint. So I have a background in city planning and also an MBA and work with a lot of our large customers. We are obviously working with HDR on this and happy to be here.
And hey there, I'm Dustin Davis. I'm a solutions data analyst at Urban Footprint. I have a background in economics, and I work closely with Nathan to support a variety of projects.
Great. The fourth person we have on the team is from EPS. His name is Jason Moody. So I'll give you an opportunity to introduce yourself.
Thank you. Jason Moody. I'm a managing principal at EPS. We're a real estate economics firm, and we have offices in Sacramento and Oakland and LA, and happy to be part of this process.
Thanks. The work effort. So data collection, housing capacity, and urban footprint scenario development. And the way we're gonna do this webinar today is I'll take about 20 minutes. I'll walk you through the work to date. What we did to find the data, collect the data, put it into the tool that we've had for Urban Footprint. Then I'm going to give Urban Footprint 20 minutes to show you a live viewing of this, of the tool and how it was and how it works. I'm going to come back and I'm going to quickly describe some of the scenarios that we created for just one city. I'm going to hand it off to EPS for about 10 minutes, and then we'll do about 10 minutes of question and answer. There might be one break right after Urban Footprint, because I think that might be where the frequently asked questions will come out of, and we'll see if there's any questions associated with the data and the tool itself. So let's see here. How do I advance this? Stop sharing a second. Escape. Okay, hold on. Back to share. Okay. Doesn't seem to advance when I'm in this mode. So I'm going to share a different screen for now. It's going to be as much of a full screen as I can get. And tell me when you see this.
See it. I see it.
Okay, perfect. You're going to have to see my little buttons here. For some reason, the other one wasn't advancing. So let me go through the methodology that we created. This methodology was described by the guidebook memo. It's a 5-part process. The first part is identification of the sites. The first 3 parts are really 100% data based, right? We found the sites by opening up our program and plugging in different variables and different filters, and we'll show you how that works in a second. Then we make some assumptions on whether it's low or very low income. We take in this case, we actually took the sizes of the units of the sites to determine which one of these could be. And we put different product types in each of the different sites, and we multiplied that density times the area that we were found within the program. This gives you a capacity. This tells you if you take area times density, it gives you a number that you could say is relatively accurate as far as what the vacant sites are and applying that density. And we're going to walk through that process. After we walk through that a little bit, I'm going to show you what we did below the line. So the line is the orange line here, and that's really scenario development. We started calling it Grand Boulevards because what we did was we started looking at the non-vacant sites as described in Part D. What this does is it allows you to go beyond just the vacant sites and applying a density for your housing goals. It actually says, should we rezone? Should we upzone? Should we look at AB 2011 as a process to start to apply some housing? And then finally, it's the adequate sites, the determination of adequate sites. What this does is more of a qualitative look. Everything above the line is a data-based quantitative look at how you get there. Below the line, it's really a qualitative. So you're making some adjustments and some to that. So there's a couple quantifiers to the data. We were able to collect data for all 8 COGs with a few qualifiers. Fresno was partial, and it's really the unincorporated parts of the county are missing in our data, but the city of Fresno is complete. So I'll show you some scenarios for the city itself versus the county. The only other quantifier is that Stanislaus is now complete, but the caveat is it's zoning rather than the general plan data for the unincorporated areas. These are your target numbers, and really there's 2 parts of the targets themselves. There's the overall units that are prescribed here for each of the counties, but they're broken down into percentages of low, very low, low, moderate, and above moderate. We can't say exactly how this breaks out, but we can show you what we did for the assumption of how this breaks out. And really, it's about the scale of the sites themselves. And I'll show you what we did for those. So each one of these, we were able to look at countywide, Fresno County, and we were able to put on a series of filters. And I'm going to hand this off to Nathan and Dustin in about 5 minutes. And we're going to show you what filters we used. In this case, there's a reminder up here of what your target number is. So there's 58,298 units prescribed in the Fresno County. We were able to put 4 different filters on the vacant sites. The first filter is 0.2 to 0.5 acres. The next one is half an acre to 10 acres. The next one is 10 to 40. And then the final one is 40 and above. What this helps us do is it helps us apply a density, right? So in the lower corner where it says Fresno County, you'll see the different 0.5 to 0.2 to 0.5. And we found 1,172 different vacant sites in that area for an acreage of 351 acres. What we assumed was it's a small site, so you apply a lower density. You're probably only going to get 1 unit on each of these sites. So we applied a 5 dwelling units per acre for a total of 1,755. To continue on this process, 0.5 to 10, you have 534 vacant sites, which total about 1,127 acres. And what we did here was we assumed that you could put a townhouse product type. And Jason's going to describe these more specifically of what these typologies are. But you can go to a higher density. You can go to 20 units per acre on the net. Remember, these are vacant sites and they're not a gross number, right? They don't include any streets. It's the actual net number of the sites themselves for a total of 22,540 units. The next level of the filter is 10 to 40 acres. We found 82 of these sites for a total of 1,666. We applied once again a higher density. The size of the site describes what kind of product you could put on it. What kind of density you're going to be able to get on it. That equals 49,982. The final one, we actually go back down in density. So anything bigger than 40 acres is usually around the periphery of the site. So we actually go back down in density to 5 units per acre because it's probably a single family product type in this case. So how do we find the income ranges? Well, you can start to apply these different products within it too, right? You could say the stuff at the edge is the single family, so more moderate, but you can also apply any percentage of these products internal to this number. In this case, in Fresno, we found an excess of 23,087 units. If your number is blue, it's an excess. If your number is red, it means there's a deficiency. Kern has a lot of sites. We're talking almost 132,000 acres of vacant property that we were able to find in Bakersfield and in the different cities that surround it. What we found in the vacant sites is there's an adequate number of units. If you do the same methodology, you apply the density to these different filters and product, different sites, you're in an excess of more than 1 million in this case. So let's go to the first one that has what we would consider a deficiency, and that's Kings. So Kings, we did the exact same methodology. What you're lacking here are the larger sites, right? We couldn't find one that was in the 10 to 40 range. And nothing in the 40 and above range for a total of 2,395 units. Therefore, you have your 7,000 down to find this. So there's some sort of rezoning process where you're looking at different ways to get to your target number. We're back to a blue number in Madeira here. We have 1,682 acres of vacant sites. We apply those densities and we have a capacity of about 24,085 in this case. And once again, The target is always in the top here, 12,243. And the number here in the bottom is what we're saying the vacant sites have capacity to do on this slide.
Joey, you may want to take just a moment to explain the differences in data that allowed you to develop this, because there were differences among the different counties in terms of how much data was received, correct?
Absolutely, and we got it at different times too. So a couple of them came real early, so we were able to establish these numbers pretty quick, and a couple of them came late. And I'm going to let Urban Footprint answer some of that question later on too, as to when it came and what the data was, and whether it was a general plan or whether it was the raw material. In this case, Merced, we're saying it's about 15,000 short to achieve that in the vacant sites. And the last two are San Joaquin County, around Stockton. We're saying there's an excess of 25,000 to achieve this. And then finally, there's deficiency in the Stanislaus. I'm sorry, there's one more after that, Tulare. So actually, what I'm going to do, it's what segues well, Robert, is hand it off to Nathan and Dustin, and we're going to get a live demonstration of this program, of this tool, to show you how we came up with these numbers. So who's going to share first, Nathan, you or Dustin?
Yes, I'll go ahead and set up share and do kind of a precursor walkthrough of some of the data conversation that we've had and where some of this is coming from. So essentially what you're going to find, and let me just switch screens here. What you're going to find is that we're going to have geometries that are based upon best available data. This comes from a third-party data source that we purchase this data from quarterly. That data source specifically pulls geometries in from the local assessor's offices. So rather than us going to try to knock on assessor's offices' doors, we just buy it from a third party. So it's best available, updated quarterly. So those are the geometries you're looking at here. With regard to the specifics of the general plan land use, I'm going to turn that over to Dustin to talk a little bit about how we worked with some of the data and sourcing there.
Yeah, thanks, Nathan. So you all provided us with general plan data we ultimately received it from 33 jurisdictions. And so what we did with that is, essentially all of those general plan codes were different for each different jurisdiction. So we took all of that and sort of harmonized it into a single layer for general plan. So for each county, you can see a consistent set of labels for general plan codes across all jurisdictions in that county. So that's what Nathan is showing you here in the classes, basically. So this was a process of taking general plan layers from each individual city and often overlaying them with the sort of county unincorporated general plan. So there are some areas of overlap there as well. So you'll kind of see that in the layer. There were a few areas, including the sort of unincorporated parts of Stanislaus County, that we couldn't find general plan data, but we had to rely on zoning. So with that slight caveat, and also as Joey mentioned, we didn't get full data for unincorporated Fresno County. But otherwise, we do have pretty full coverage here.
I want to go back. Fresno has a lot going on. Yeah, thank you for that walkthrough, and hopefully that answers some of the data questions. But if there are others, please do feel free to drop them in the chat, or otherwise we'll figure those out as we go forward here. So just a quick kind of live overview of what this looks like here. So again, this is the Urban Footprint platform. It is a web-based application, and so it is displaying geospatial information here. We're not going to get into the details of all the little clicks and all the features and things like that today, but we are open and available to each of the cogs. We want to do a group training session for the 8 of you, for your named person that's going to be receiving access to this. So we'll do that at a later date, so don't feel like you're getting cut short today. So what you can see here is, obviously, you zoom in and out is pretty intuitive. Again, all these shapes are parcels. This particular layer that's being shown is, again, that consolidated kind of housing insights general land use category. And so we have other things in here, obviously, one of which is going to be the vacant indicator. So you can see here we have these columns. And so all of this information can be displayed. It's one data set with multiple columns. And so we can click on vacant here, and now we have an indication of where all those vacant parcels are. So this is referencing the map that Joey was just showing earlier, which was broken into a classification system, going from, small half-acre lots all the way up to 40-acre lots. All that data is in here. So here you can see we have total acreage per lot. So all of these are viewable. You can zoom in and investigate each of these. You can also display these with a certain break. So if you wanted to depart from maybe the way that Joey classified it, although I don't think you will, you could potentially do that, but we could filter those out. And again, we can go into that vacant category here.
And Nathan, just to clarify, this is vacant but zoned for residential, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So this is, well, Dustin, do you want to chime in on some of that?
Yeah, sure. So what you can actually do is combine filters in the platform. So you would need to do, first of all, a filter for vacancy, and then also take that general plan category that we created and just select the residential types. So that would give you all of the vacant residential parcels.
Okay, good. Thanks.
So the platform is super dynamic. Again, you can use a natural break system just to say, well, give me within my data set within this particular county, give me groupings that make sense distributed within the data set itself. Or again, you could just go in and make those modifications here and just say, well, I want the lowest to be 0 and the highest to be half an acre right there. And I want that to actually be yellow. And then the next step is going to be half acre all the way up to 10 acres. So you can customize this as you see fit, and again, make those changes as you would like it. Symbology is custom per user. So that is why we give you all that power there to kind of make those changes within the platform. And then you would just save that. I'll just go ahead and discard it for now. So that is the layer set. Again, you do have some other things available to you as a standard kind of access within Urban Footprint. So not only do you have this SJV housing insights layer, but we give you our standard layer set as well. This is Urban Footprint created, so it doesn't have anything to do with your specific project, but it is our view of the world, which is based on a completely different methodology. But you could go in there and take a look at that as well if you wanted to. So from that point, I think, Joey, would you like me to show some of the accessibility maps and how that looks?
Yes, and I'll give a set of those for Fresno. So if you have some of the other ones, or Fresno is fine also too.
Okay. Yeah, we're in Modesto right now. Is that okay?
Yeah, it's perfect.
Okay, perfect. I think we didn't run them from some of the others. One of the things to note is that the Urban Footprint platform was built with analytics modules in mind for kind of investigating the livability or the items of interest within a community, whether that be walk accessibility, your transportation metrics like VMT and GHG. You can get into that if you wanted to, but we just focus on walk and transit accessibility for now. But all of these modules are available to be run on your project, your county. And so what happens is a layer will be the result of the output of this analytics run, actually several layers. So one of the things that we can do is we can pull up one of those layers called walk access to destinations. I'm gonna go ahead and click on that. And what you're gonna see here is we have many different types of points of interest or destinations. So this is time to nearest park. So here you can see it's a minute walk 0 to 5 and increments thereof. And then you can change this to a couple of other metrics as well. So if you want to know walk access, you're going to get the same thing here. You're going to get a map view of that. It's going to be at the parcel level. So you can see where our healthcare facilities are. Clearly, some people have a pretty long walk to one of those if they had to walk. And then, the list goes on. We have schools as well. So this is kind of how that works. Within this, we also have transit access as well. So if we wanted to look at transit access, so it incorporates obviously the local transportation network, not vehicular single occupancy cars. This is going to be transportation as in your bus system, rail, any of that you have present. This is what park access looks like now. So it obviously is going to extend the access to those types of facilities. And then again, you can go into some of these other ones as well. We have transit access to employment destinations as well. So here's the destinations one. You can see that dynamically showing up, and better access. Obviously, you can reach a little bit further of a distance. All right. Anything you wanted me to highlight here, Joey, other than what?
No, I'm going to come back to this a little bit because I'll show you the ones that we did for Fresno. And this really gets us into the qualitative below the line stuff when we start to look at the non-vacant sites or the ones that aren't zoned residential. So I thought Michael and Robert, we'd take a short break here to kind of see if there was any questions. I know the ones that we usually get are about urban footprint and about the data, and I wanted to see if there was anybody who was watching that had any questions at this point to the gang.
We do not have any hands up at this time, but we do have a question in the Q&A, which is, how did you account for topographic challenges that are not rolled into the general plan?
Topographic. Yeah, it's a series of data points, right, Dustin and Nathan? So the general plan is one of them. One of the other things that we can do is floodplain. We can do we have a set of layers that actually look at natural features, so topography, floodplaining, and we can avoid those in the qualitative analysis. Would that be a good answer to the question, Dustin and Nathan?
Yeah, that's right. And this general plan layer itself does have columns that are for those hazards. So you can flag, earthquake zones or flood zones or whatever you need. So in that sense, if that's what you mean by topographic challenges, yeah.
Okay, the next question, are densities per general plan designation listed per parcel or more accurate density projections for cities?
The densities are assumptions at this point. It's not about the zoning itself. We made an assumption in the case of the densities, not the general plan, right? Dustin, is that the answer to that question? Yeah,
that's right. So, I mean, not every general plan layer had numeric densities associated with each category. Some did, but they sort of varied widely across categories and jurisdictions. So we did have to make some sort of assumptions about, for example, what is like low density residential, generally, like what is a number on that?
Right, but the projections were based on a per acre general plan. I mean, per parcel general plan designation, correct?
That's correct.
Yes.
Okay, next question. Were city spheres of influence taken into consideration?
City spheres of influence.
We did not. So we just used basically the general plan layers from each jurisdiction itself, which I believe are within the city limits. So it's not including the sphere of influence.
But
Okay.
technically, if those areas in the sphere of influence are zoned for residential by the county, they by de facto would be in the county number, I guess, right?
Right. That's right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But that assumes that you have the data for the counties, right? Because wasn't that an issue in terms of data collection? Was we were getting partial data from some of the counties?
Yeah, that's all been resolved except for Fresno County. Fresno is the only county where we don't have the unincorporated county general plan.
Some of them came late, Robert, but we were able to clean them up. And the only caveat is the Fresno County. Every other piece of data we did receive. Now, cleanup does take some time. So I would say, during this process, when we hand off this, there will be a continued cleanup of those. But we received data.
Okay, moving on. Some jurisdictions are updating their general plans. How will more current information be integrated into the tool?
So it's an active process. We can keep updating the general plans, right? Tell us the process of how we got that in there, Dustin, the general plans, and how can they be updated? And what's the time frame of them, I guess would be the second question back to the group.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that would be a process basically of ingesting the new sort of spatial layers that reflect the new general plans. Most of the sort of difficult work in this was classifying all the different codes within our sort of taxonomy. So I would say as long as the sort of underlying codes haven't changed too radically from one point to the next with the general plan, it shouldn't be too difficult to map, take the mapping we've already done and apply it to the new codes.
Yeah, my understanding was also, Dustin, and correct me when I'm wrong, that there was a lot of different colors, for example, that could have been different. There was each county had its own coding process or legend, I'll call it. And part of what we did in this was collect them and stabilize them into one set of information for the eight cogs.
That's right. And I think given that we already have that sort of exercise done, it should be easier in the future, potentially, if we were to add more or update.
Okay, so next question for the for the RENA allocation shown in the first few slides. Are you able to see more specific allocations within the counties? For example, City of Modesto's RENA and surplus deficit estimate versus, say, unincorporated counties surplus or deficit estimate.
Yes, we are. And I'm going to show you an example next of how we break it down for the city. We did it for the city of Fresno itself. The next set of slides will show you how we did it in a much more finite process. And I'll wait to sort of answer that question then.
Okay. Cynthia in Lodi says, we recently updated our SOI MSR, which will likely play into our 6-cycle housing element inventory. Is there an ability to include the updated SOI, which I think was kind of partially answered in a previous?
The answer is yes. It's always a moving target, unfortunately, right? So there's this is the first round of numbers, I believe, is what we put our targets at. Is that correct, Robert? And now there's a series of target numbers that can be updated. And I'll show you an example when it gets into a red number of how to deal with that if the target continues to move up past what we feel the capacity is.
And then the last question at this time, some of the previous slides went by quickly. I wanted to see if the PowerPoint and or recording will be provided to attendees. And the answer is, of course, yes. Michael addressed that at the beginning of the webinar. If you, after a couple of days, it should be posted on the website, SJV COGS, sjvcogs.org/REAP. You would be able to find the recording and presumably the PowerPoint as well. So I think, Michael, you're going to put that in the chat, right?
The PowerPoint will be posted along with the recording in about 2 to 3 days.
Right. Okay. And at this time, oh, here comes one more. Also, when, where will jurisdictions be able to access the maps and data? That's a key question.
Yes. So we are at the end of this contract that we're under, this work. We are going to be handing over, we want one person from each jurisdiction given to us. Robert and Michael will hand us that information. And you will own a license as part of the grant that Robert and Michael received as part of this process. So yeah, you'll get a license for Urban Footprint and the data that's included in it.
It will be a key cog, not city contact, a key cog contact, and then they'll work with their respective jurisdictions to access this. But all valleys in the city will have access.
Yeah, right. So unless we're directed specifically by the cog to provide it to a third party, the assumption is that the license will go to the cog. And so, and as I recall, it's a 1 year license. And then it would be up to the COGs or the jurisdictions to update that, to re-up the subscription at that point. So,
and my apologies if that was the only rhetorical problem I had today. I'm doing pretty good because there's a lot of alphabet soup flying around COGs, and so I'm glad you clarified that. Thank you.
Will there be a publicly available site?
That is up to you guys, Robert and Michael, I believe. I mean, we're going to hand you the information, and the question is we put it up into the site, or you already have one, don't you?
We have a publicly available website to store the static data. I think the question relates more to kind of more of the dynamic, live. And I don't know that we would use a license for a publicly available site, but we can discuss that further.
Okay. All right, I am going to go back to my show, and we'll come back to Q&As. We still have two parts of the show that I want to get through, and then we'll have about 10 more minutes towards the end to get to your questions too. But I wanted to show you quickly a scenario that looks at the fifth part of the process, which is looking at non-vacant sites. When we first started this, we had Fresno was our first piece of information or data that was available. So we marched further down the line with the Fresno work. And what we did was we looked at it by city. So now we have this more finite, finer tooth assignment. Total allocation in the city of Fresno is 35,972. And what we were able to do with Urban Footprint is do the exact same process. We said 0.2 to 0.5 up to 40. We applied the same densities in this case. And what we found was there's a deficiency of about 12,987 in just the residential zoned vacant sites. So you go to a different strategy here. You start to go to more of a qualitative strategy. And what we did in this case is we looked at the 6-lane boulevards in the city of Fresno. We're able to zoom in with the data and find these parcels. By right, with AB 2011, it allows residential to be built on this to get to your RENA numbers and your REAP numbers. And what Nathan showed earlier are the same set of what I would call these heat maps, these qualitative maps that say, this is a good place to grow. Instead of around the edges or on the vacant sites, this is an opportunity to start to infill your cities and your corridors and your boulevards, and to create these grand boulevards. So the good news is also that these are more transit rich, right? So if you look at the heat map as it exists now with your transportation, the qualitative analysis is saying this is a good place to grow on these two corridors, on these 6-lane corridors. The second set of qualitative analysis Nathan and Dustin did was looked at transportations per household. The next heat map is walking access to schools, so it's richer in access to schools, access to parks, walking access to retail. It can even look at equity. So this is a disadvantaged community map, and this is the TCAC opportunity category. So it identifies them as highest resources, lowest resources, and moderate resources as far as the community is concerned. Within that layer is your general land use, which you can start to isolate different uses. So this is your residential parcels also. I think the question came up, what about geographic? So you can map your open spaces and your natural systems, your parks, and you can also map your flood zones or hazardous areas. In this case, it's flood. And I think you have a layer for fire is one of the layers also that's been identified. So for each of the counties that we're saying there's a number below the target, there's a second set of analysis that could happen that says, let's focus on the non-vacant sites. So now I want to hand it off to Jason. He wants to show us what these product types are, these building types, and discuss some of the economics of this analysis. So take it away.
Thanks, and thanks you, Joey. So you can see I've got great ability to map out capacity and a variety of metrics. What we wanted to do is maybe kind of look more at the market feasibility and whether the market actually will and how it could provide the new residential development and where it might do that and in what format or product type. So we looked at a lot of socioeconomic data on pricing, population growth, but first, as a kind of a reference point, I want to circle back to the RENA targets. As you can see, the targets overall are kind of aggressive, both regressive relative to past. There's last bottom line here. You have about a 20% increase relative to the previous RENA numbers. And at the same time, the last number, your RENA for all the counties of 280,000 is actually about twice what was actually built in the last 10 years. So it's a pretty aggressive RENA allocation. I'm guessing that HCD partly did that to kind of raise the bar, if you will, set a high bar so cities could produce more housing. And they may also be believing that there's going to be a much more growth in the valley than there has been in the last year or last 10 years. We can go to the next slide. This was just kind of for context. So while RENA have very aggressive targets, population growth in the county has been slowing. The squiggly line is essentially the year by year change. As you can see, in the last say 5 years, it's been below 1% annual growth. Historically, since 1970, the county grew by an average of about 2%, so about twice that. So growth has slowed a lot. So the same time that RENA is giving you very kind of aggressive targets, population growth is slowing at the same time. So it seems like a little slightly counterintuitive situation, but you can go to the next slide. One more thing is that while your population has been lagging, your housing supply has lagged even further. So here is a kind of relationship between housing stock growth and population growth. And as you can see, even in California, but especially in San Joaquin Valley, the population growth has been growing faster over the last 10 years than, say, I think this is that's supposed to be 2010 to 2020 on the top. Housing growth has gone slower than population growth, which is one of the factors, of course, just one of the factors that's been leading to price escalation and housing cost escalation in the valley and throughout California, for that matter. You can go to the next slide. In terms of the production, it has been focused. It has historically been focused and remains highly focused on single family in the valley. As you can see, compared to say California as a whole, which is about 57% single family, the valley is closer to 72%. Sorry, it's okay. So the growth has been focused on single family growth. You can go to the next slide. And in the valley, has, if you look, here's comparing the percent multifamily by the total housing stock in the valley compared to other areas. The San Joaquin Valley is about 19%, LA County up to 44, but California as a whole is 32% multifamily. So San Joaquin has been very focused on single family development. So that kind of gets us into this typology question and the different densities that they were showing. You can go to the next slide. This is the first slide was growth. The first slide was the inventory. This is the new development over the last 10 years. And you can see this is even more accentuating single family. New development in the valley is about 80% single family compared to, say, California as a whole. New development has gone the other way, complete opposite. California as a whole has been more and more growth in the multifamily, whereas compared to historical trends, whereas compared to the inventory, whereas the valley has been much more predominantly on the single family side. You can go to the next slide. That said, there are some pockets of higher density development in the valley. So again, 32%. Here's some areas where there's some pockets. So that just kind of demonstrates that it's not impossible to do higher density product. It can happen, and it has been happening. In certain locations, you just have the right confluence of market conditions and available sites, et cetera. You can get these product types. You can go to the next slide. Kind of drilling down a little bit on the multifamily rental market, which is a very big part of providing a higher density development, because the rental product is really a sweet spot in many cases for higher density because it's institutional investors. Overall, the market for rental in the valley has kind of been bifurcated between either the kind of luxury garden apartments, or on the one end, or the kind of below market BMRs on the other end. The garden apartment number is, you can say, 64% there. Is a big chunk of it is that kind of garden apartment. Most of that is not affordable units. It's a very small percent of affordable units, where a lot of the affordability units were in the in the low rise and in mid rise, that's where the affordable product tends to be. Those are deed restricted. You can go to the next slide. So just stepping back again, where you have the pricing, there's a lot of factors causing prices to go increase so fast in the Valley and in California as a whole. Low interest rates being one of them, but one of the bigger one, of course, is population growth combined with minimal housing supply. So this kind of gives maybe lends some legitimacy to the HCDs to push to raise the bar, if you will, on housing production, because the lack of housing production has created some pricing constraints, pressures in the market. Here you can just see California's price increase is about over the last, say, 7 years is about 9%. The Valley is actually even higher than California as a whole, although it's about the average price in the Valley overall is lower than California. So it is an affordable market, even though prices have actually been going up faster. You can see here on that third column, price as a percent of California, San Joaquin is about 62%, and on down the line, place like Kings is actually 40%, so much lower. You can go to the next slide. This isn't the for sale. This is the rent price. Same story. Rents have been growing pretty strong in the Valley, but again, we're still much lower as a percent of California. So growth in the Valley is rent growth has been faster than California or LA County. The Sacramento area has been growing faster than San Joaquin Valley, but that's one of the few places that has. But for the most part, again, the San Joaquin Valley rents are about 60% of the average for California. So rents are lower, but growing faster. You can go to the next slide. This is just showing you that new product in the Valley, this is an important, a positive sign. New rental product in the Valley generates a pretty high premium over the existing older product, much more so than, say, California as a whole. So that last column, premium as a percent, it's 87% for a new product. So that would suggest that a new rental product in the Valley is going to do much better than the existing inventory would be, and much better than California as a whole. You can go to the next slide. There's also a positive sign, is that the Valley has a lot of renters, and renters are generally the sweet spot for higher density development, less so than California as a whole, but more so than the US. So the percent renters in the Valley are much higher than the average in the United States, but still below California. You can go to the next slide. Finally, I wanted to mention that we looked a little bit closer at townhomes here as a potential for the new market. The new townhomes do present an opportunity for entry level to high dense product. It does provide some level for opportunity for entry level ownership opportunities. If you look at these two scenarios, we have a 20% down scenario and a 10% down. If you look at a single family house, 45% of the household incomes can afford a townhome, which is much higher than, say, a single family house. And then an existing townhome, close to 60% of the household can afford an existing townhome. Again, lower than a single family. So townhomes do present an opportunity. So you can go now and just kind of on the one hand, on the other hand type analysis about the infill challenges in the Valley. So there's some challenges, obviously, for more infill and higher density of the type that Joe's been referring to. One is generally site acquisition can be difficult and time consuming and complex. The development of higher density products is generally more expensive. It requires higher skilled labor, building materials, et cetera. You often have to upsize your infrastructure to make it work. The demand segments currently are a little bit thinner. You generally have either the affordable product or the kind of luxury product, which is empty nesters or kind of young professionals, and that market isn't huge in the Valley right now. The developer expertise for higher density development tends to not be as much as say in the coastal areas. The developers tend to have preferences for the single family product, and that corresponds to financing too. Financing availability for higher density is a little bit harder to get. We can go to the next slide. I think that on the other hand, there's some positives. The some positives about the potential for higher density development. Number one, I think that over time you're going to find that the land prices are going to kind of modulate so that the pricing of large swaths of vacant land will be more and more expensive, and higher density will be probably a more economically viable approach. There is some evidence of growing acceptability for us, particularly for townhomes and luxury apartments in the valley. We would expect, and we have already seen, that building technologies are reducing the cost to some degree for higher development. Some of the techniques for developing higher development the pricing can come down. There is some potential state and federal funding for higher density development, particularly the kind of Build Back Better infrastructure stuff might help with capacity enhancements for infrastructure. And as Joey mentioned, there's opportunities in some of these commercial corridors for sites that might be the changing nature of retail has made some of these strip commercial sites less viable for retail, and they present opportunities for converting over to residential development. And lastly, of course, the policy landscape is changing rapidly, including obviously HCD's more aggressive RENA targets, but also AB 21 as AB 2011, as Joey had mentioned, and various housing accountability laws are making it easier to develop housing, and particularly higher density housing. Now, the last set of slides are a bunch about building typologies, the lot sizes, and whether or not the last row is it feasible in the valley currently. So here, for example, a single family, we go all the way to what we call the high density single family product, which is a rental product. We've seen that in other places emerging. It hasn't yet emerged significantly in the valley. Obviously, all the other single family product types are very strong in the valley. You can go to the next slide. This is looking at the single family attached, which is the townhome product. It's improving significantly. We see a lot more of this type of product in the valley. I think primarily in wealthier places like Clovis, Tracy, some in Kings County. It's happening. The accessory dwelling unit, there was a lot of promise about how that would potentially create more housing supply. It really hasn't materialized in the valley as much as people would have hoped. So we've seen very little activity in the ADU category. You can go to the last slide. Finally, this is the multifamily product types. And there's 4 different categories we looked at here. I don't think that the wrap product or the mid-rise is really happening in the valley yet. It is obviously happening in Southern California and in San Francisco and in Sacramento. But the garden apartments and the tuck under, we do have some examples of that in selected submarkets. So those are all the building types. I have a bunch of back pocket slides for case studies of examples of high density development here in the
it'll be included in the PowerPoint that was distributed, but we're not going to go over them right now because of lack of time. We have about 5 minutes, I think, for Q&A.
Can you just tease, spend 1 second per slide on those case studies so that folks know what?
Sure. We'll just poke through each one of them really quickly.
There you
This
go.
is a townhome product in Fresno. Go to the next one. This is a townhome product in Clovis. Next one. This is a duplex in Mountain House. Next one. This is a duplex in Tracy. Next one. This is affordable housing in Stockton. Next one. Garden apartment in Tracy. Next one. Garden apartment in Fresno. Townhome in Bakersfield. Mid-rise in Modesto. Garden in Lathrop. Garden in Tracy, another one. And last is this is one to give you example. This is not in the Central Valley. This is the rental product, single family rental product as an example in Tracy. I think it might be something that might work in the long term. It's a high density, 14 units per acre, single family rental product.
So I think we just wanted to say thanks, hand it back to Robert and Michael to sort of send us out or answer questions as they came up.
Yeah, and we do have additional questions. From Jennifer Ryan, is there an ability to adjust the density allowed per acre if it doesn't reflect the true number that could be accomplished in that jurisdiction? this would be potentially important for those that are demonstrating a deficit.
Absolutely. You can change the dial on all of these if you see fit. We made one assumption for this first go around of alternatives, this sort of first order alternatives. And we made some reasonable assumptions. In other words, if it's 0.2 to 0.5, you're probably only going to get one unit on there no matter what you do. So yeah, you can up the density on the smaller side lots. You can lower it as you see fit within the tool.
Yeah, and then for this next question, you may want to go back a couple of slides to the garden apartments. The question is, can you clarify what you mean by garden apartment in this context?
This one.
Oh, I think that the main thing we were and you can Rowan, Joey, but basically what we talk about a garden apartment is it's generally a surface parked product. And some of them are walk up. You may not have an elevator in garden apartments. And they're maybe 3 stories. Joey, do you have any? You're the planner.
I am. That's a pretty good analysis of that, Jason. The garden apartment. I know these are rhetorical taglines or titles to these, but that's correct. Usually 3 stories, usually surface parked, a simple double loaded configuration corridor, and access from the street.
All right, and another question, why are building materials more costly for higher density development and more highly skilled labor needed?
Because the building structures are a little bit more complex. You have integrated HVAC and you have elevators. Sometimes you need a higher, different types of steel and et cetera. You won't require for a single family house. Some of this, so there is just the systems are generally more complex. I would say though that obviously you can have a very expensive luxury single family house with all the bells and whistles, the stainless steels and the wolf ovens and all that stuff. You can go really high, but that's going to be reflected in the cost as well. So and you can also do that in a townhome or an apartment, but generally speaking, the systems tend to be you need more foundational support. A variety of factors raise those costs on a per square foot basis.
Foundations, fire ratings, fire separations, use of steel. All of those start to pump up the costs a bit in the higher density.
And as you've already mentioned too, infrastructure costs, infrastructure expansion necessary to accommodate those types of developments.
Yeah, the parking's a good one too. Yeah, I mean, you probably have infrastructure in a say greenfield type environment too, where you need to expand roads, and so there's a little bit of a complexity there about which infrastructure is going to be harder. A greenfield, you need to expand more roads and sewer. It's got to be all new, but upsizing existing can be very expensive too. So it just depends on the circumstances for infrastructure.
Yeah.
Okay, and right now that appears to be all the questions. We have no open questions and no hands in the air.
Yeah, no, so once again, yeah, great timing. We're at 59 after. Jason from EPS, always enjoy the real estate economics approach to this. HDR, Calthorpe, Joey and team, thank you so much. That is a very comprehensive tool that was well done and presented. I think I will follow up. I'm going to break from history a little bit. I'll follow up with an email to all the attendees and attach the PowerPoint as a PDF and then give you the contact per county so that you can access this system. I imagine some of our cities are very sophisticated, may not rely on urban footprint as much, but I think there's a lot of takers out there that they see that this is a potential good tool, excellent tool for them to do some analysis on in their city. So we pretty much thank you very much for that.
So we really appreciate being part of this. I want to thank you, Robert and Michael, for fostering us along here as best we could. It's never easy to do this during the last 3 years in COVID, but we seem to have managed and delivered for you guys, and we're happy to be a part of your team. So appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you all so much.
Take care.
Have a good day, everyone.
Bye-bye.